Welcome back. This is Table Talk. I'm Paul Beaulier with Blaine Bondi and Tracy Washington. Tell me about that process again, Tracy. That's not a game, but kind of walk us through that. What's going to happen, how it's going to happen, what facets of government will play what part in the process.
I think the biggest part of this process that happens without folks really seeing it, and it's sort of a cottage industry for many, is this mapping. I mean, after you get this census data, the most important work that is done is mapping of your population. And so, be they nonprofit groups or the legislature through its arm that's going to be doing this work, or whomever is going to be coming in, and we're going to have lots of advocacy groups here in the state, be they the Family Focus on Family Forum, whatever that group is, and others sitting here trying to figure out where people are. So that's the first part of it. Right after that April 1 census is done, we're going to start trying to figure out where our people are. Then the Louisiana legislature has until April 1st of the following year, so 2011, to actually accept its census data. During this time, between April of 2010 and April 2011, you're going to get people doing some preliminary mapping. And then during that legislative session, which I believe I have the dates here, it's going to be for 2011, April 25 through June 24 next year. You're going to have several committee meetings in the Capitol with the legislature, trying to figure out, in special committees, actually sitting there and trying to figure out how to redraw maps for the Supreme Court, for Bessie, and most certainly for the state legislature. They're also going to be obviously sitting around and trying to figure out how do we redraw these federal congressional district maps, and that process is like any other legislative process. There's got to be some approval of those final maps. Bam, either it's going to happen then. I suspect during a special session is when they're going to do that, and they're going to have to try to get that done before fall elections, because they're going to be statewide elections in 2011, as you know, and so that's going to have to happen. Now, I don't want to go into effects, but generally what we see and what we saw in 1991, 1992, you're going to get litigation out of this, because whatever the state draws, and we go back to the minority communities, we suspect there are going to be powerful lobbies trying to consolidate, merge the second, and I believe it's, what's Charlie Melancon's, the third district. And
will those effects be political? Will they be economic? Will there be a combination of vote? Will black folk get it again?
Well, I think certainly there'll be a lot of political influence. We're in a very interesting situation. We have both houses of the Louisiana State Legislature have Democratic majorities, although very slightly, and a lot of people would argue that a lot of these Democrats are only Democrats because they say they're Democrats, not because of what they do, what they actually do. But so it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out when the majority of our congressional delegation on the federal level is Republican. We only have two Democrats. That would be Mary Landrieu and Charlie Melancon. So obviously the Republicans want to see the 2nd district and the 3rd district join, because one, they can say, oh, well, geographically it's close.
Geographics, because you say 2nd and the 3rd district, and people may not know exactly what you're talking about. They may live in a district and not even know they live in it.
Right. Well, we have 7 districts. Basically, the 1st district encompasses most of the North Shore. It's Washington Parish, Tangipahoa Parish, obviously St. Tammany Parish, and it dips down into Orleans Parish a little bit. The 3rd district, which is Charlie Melancon's district, is most of your lower area, Jefferson Parish, Assumption, Lafourche, St. Bernard Parish. And it extends all the way to St. Martin Parish, actually. The 7th district, which is Calcasieu mostly, that's going to be your Lake Charles area. 4 and 5 are huge geographically. They actually if you look at the boot of Louisiana, let's say, it kind of splits that boot in half. In 4 being on the western border with Texas, and 5 being on the eastern border with Mississippi. But they stretch, literally 5 stretches from Morehouse, which is on the state line, all the way down into Iberville Parish, which is right outside of Baton Rouge.
New Orleans.
New Orleans is the 2nd congressional district, the smallest geographical district, but because we have the density to help get our numbers, we don't need to be as large. Now, one of the interesting things that I've been hearing is that, the 2nd congressional district is a gerrymandered district. No, it's not. No, it's not.
That's to guarantee
a majority minority district,
right.
And that's not at all the case. The 2nd congressional district has been around since the late 1800s. And it was a seat that was held by Lindsey Boggs from the 70s through the 90s. Now, it just so happens that the majority of the district happened to be African American. Now, this brings us into some of the interesting litigation that may or may not take place when it comes to reapportionment. Basically, the Civil Rights Act of 1965 says that you can't do anything to bus up a majority-minority district. It doesn't say that you guarantee one, but you can't do anything to dilute it. Meaning, you can't take the city of New Orleans and say, we're going to give half of it to the 1st congressional district and we're going to give the other half to the 3rd congressional district. That would be in direct violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1965. Now, but people are saying, but you lost so many people, we could join you with the 3rd district and you still have a majority-minority district based on numbers. But I think that's where you're going to see lawsuits pop up. It says you cannot dilute it. The minute they do that, it goes from 60-something% to 50-something%. And it increases the opportunity for the incumbent, Joseph Gow, who's a Republican, to at least have a fighting chance if you dilute those numbers that much. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a judicial process involved, but even that is outlined by the federal government on how all of this stuff plays out. The federal government basically said, look, even on the state level or on the local level, you can't do anything without it going through the Justice Department for certain states. Well, Louisiana is one of those certain states. Any changes, whether it's for dog catcher, or whether it's for a governor, or whether it's the Supreme Court, or whatever, if it involves districts, has to go to the Justice Department, and it has to hear it in D.C. Now, you can make challenges on a local level, but anything that gets approved is going to get approved through D.C.
The legislature is going to make those calls. You were talking earlier about committees of the state legislature. All right. Well, somebody's paying attention to this process and looking at it. The Public Affairs Research Council has come up with a document, and I'm just going to deal with the first recommendation. Recommendation 1, assign the task of congressional and legislative redistricting to an independent commission whose powers, duties, and redistricting principles are firmly established in law. Antenna go up for me. An independent commission. Explain that to me. Give me some feedback.
I don't know that I can explain it to you because I'm not so certain that the Power Report explains it well enough for me to say that we need to change this process. And frankly, you'd have to have a vote of the legislature to change the process on how we redistrict ourselves and who makes those decisions. So even accepting that recommendation would require a legislative vote. But here's the distrust factor. And again, it comes from the minority communities who often say, yeah, but who's on these independent commissions? And will our voices, our vote, our feet, our sentiment be counted? If those individuals who stand to lose the most power are not more represented or equally representative of the commission, then there is not going to be a sense that whatever recommendations come from that commission are going to be valid. Now, Paul, I will say this. To the extent that we have in this state a group of individuals and experts in Louisiana and throughout the country that can provide some guidance to our legislators, particularly on this legal landscape, which is fraught with landmines and areas where our legislators can go awry. I mean, last time we got sued. I mean, Roma vetoed the redistricting plans. We were in court over these lines, and I suspect, depending upon who's going to pay the most for lobbyists, we will be in court again. I think it would do best for our legislature to get that expert advice, be it from PAR, be it from the advocacy groups. Let's have some convenings this time, ahead of time. We know in 2009 what we anticipate will be happening by December 31st, 2011, when the state has to have its lines redrawn.